Hello, brothers. Trust you're doing well. I again apologize for not being able to do this session live, but my current circumstances really prevented me from being able to do that today. So I wanted to record this session so we could keep on pace in our preparation for gathering together next month. Yes, it's coming soon, June 16th through 20th. We'll be gathering together for Module 4. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to hearing your sermons from Psalms and Proverbs, and then introducing the prophetic genre that we'll be discussing. But for now, for this session, I want to continue in our study of the poetic genre and reviewing uh, with our focus on your Proverbs text. And so for this session, session 12, we'll be looking at assignment 3.19, and that is a block diagram, not for your assigned Colossians passage, but for your assigned Proverbs passage. And so we're going to take a look at, review quickly as diagramming. There won't be anything new really that we're going to discuss, but just review that quickly and then apply it to an example from Proverbs. All right, so with that, let's jump right in. Here are the steps that we've been following in our study of poetry and even in Proverbs. The first three steps, our focus was on the entire book of Proverbs, which is covered in assignment 315. And you can go back and look at session 3.8 on my YouTube channel for a review of that assignment. But hopefully you've completed that to this point. But if not, you can go there and take a look, and that'll help guide you into completing that assignment. And that's really looking at the book of Proverbs as a whole. And then step 4, we spent several sessions on the poetic analysis of your passage, of the passage. And assignments 3.16, 17, and 18 covered those various elements of parallelism, imagery, and figurative language, and poetic devices, and then also just the setting and structure of your passage. And then again, we looked at an example from Proverbs 1 for that. And you can review sessions 3.9, 10, and 11 if you want to take a look at what was covered there. All right. So today for session 3.12, we want to cover the block diagramming step. Yes, I know this is your favorite part of the whole process. And so you've been waiting for this very session to happen. So I wanted to give you relief from your excitement and be able to cover this session on block diagramming. So let's dive right in. First, I'd like to review diagramming with you. Just remember, diagramming, I believe, is the most effective study of epistles, and it can also provide helpful insights for poetic passages as well. Because again, if you'll recall, diagramming is most helpful for direct instruction for those texts or genres which give the truths directly. And epistles would clearly be that. It's very direct communication. And poetic passages as well are direct communication. Yes, it's figurative. There may be some symbols, other things but it's still, the truth is still communicated in a direct way, whereas narrative is indirect. It doesn't tell you the truth up front, but tells a story that will uncover the main point or the truth that the author wants the reader to understand. But because poetry is also direct in its approach in communicating biblical truth, diagramming is a helpful tool to break down and study poetry, in addition to the other things that we learned. Okay, and when we did parallelism, the focus there was on the relationship between the lines within a verse. The block diagram looks at the relationship of phrases and clauses, not just in a verse, but between verses. And so we see the structure of the song, the poem overall. Okay, it's a visual representation of the author's intended meaning. If you remember, we look at a poem, for example, a poem is broken up into stanzas. All right, that's like the paragraphs in the poem. Each stanza is made up of one or more sentences, and each sentence is made up of phrases and clauses. Remember, phrases are groups of words that together present a particular idea or a thought. Okay. A clause contains both a subject and a verb. So it's a group of words that go together that present a subject and a verb. So he ate, he subject, ate breakfast. Ate is the verb, subject is he. Whereas a phrase does not contain both a subject and a verb. So for example, in the house there's no verb and subject here. All right, only the preposition in and the noun house. All right, so that's not a clause. But both of them, phrases and clauses, are what make up a sentence, and then the sentence or more makes up a stanza, and then the stanzas make up the poem as a whole. And so the diagram is just a breaking down of those particular steps, pieces. And we want to get it down to the phrases and clauses and then determine where each phrase and clause fits within the stanza. That is, what is connected to what? What phrase or clause? What is it modifying? What is it linked to? And that is what the diagram shows us. So, how do we do that? How do we identify, what's the process to come up with the block diagram? Well, first, identify the first independent clause in the stanza. Second, identify the remaining clauses and phrases in the stanza, and that is by looking for our old friends, the connector words. All right? And then state how each phrase and clause functions in the sentence. And then finally, place the independent clause to the left and the remaining ones, clauses and phrases, under the words that they modify. And we'll be going through example from Proverbs 1, 8 to 15 to show us how to do that. Okay? So, first step, identify the first independent clause that you see in the stanza. Okay? And remember, an independent clause gives a complete thought. It stands alone. So, for example, he hit the ball. That's a complete statement. There's a subject and a verb, so it's a clause, and it presents a complete thought. I am happy. Also, a complete thought. Now, a dependent clause, again, it's a clause, so it has a subject and a verb, but it modifies another word in the sentences. It doesn't stand alone. So, for example, who hit the ball? Or so that I would be happy. Yes, we have the subject I and happy be, the verb would be, but in this case, it doesn't just say I would be happy, so that I would be happy. So this conjunction that's introducing us tells us it's dependent on something else. Who hit the ball? All right. Again, we have the subject who, the verb hit, but we don't know what it's connected to something. It's modifying something because of this relative pronoun who. All right. So we identify the first independent clause that we see in the stanza. All right. And then from there, the next step is so let's do that first for this example from Proverbs 8. Let me just read. I'm going to read these 8 verses. Then we'll go back and do the first step and look for the first independent clause. All right. So first, let me read it. Hear, my son, your father's instruction. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. Indeed, they are a graceful wreath to your head and ornaments about your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, even whole as those who go down to the pit. We will find all kinds of precious wealth. We will fill our houses with spoil. Throw in your lot with us. We shall all have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your feet from their path. Okay, so we want to diagram this particular stanza, this poem. So we want to start with, where's the first independent clause? Where's the first subject and verb that stand alone? And we have it right at the beginning. Hear, my son, your father's instruction. That here's the verb. My son, that's the subject, or really you, my son, is the subject. And then here's the verb, and then your father's instruction. Instruction is my object. Okay? So hear your father's instruction. And by the way, notice there's an and there, and it's connecting a second independent clause. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. So actually, we see two independent clauses right at the beginning. They both are presenting a complete thought. They're standing alone, though they are connected together by this coordinating conjunction and. Okay, now there may be more independent clauses as we go through the rest of the verses, but that's okay. You don't have to identify them right away. We'll just get to them as we go through the subsequent verses. But at least we want to find the first one, or in this case, we could see two right away. Now, once we do that, we now want to identify all the remaining phrases and clauses in the stanza. How do we do that? Remember, we want to look for those connector words. Okay, and the most common, remember, I'm going to keep reminding you guys of this, to remember, memorize even the most common connector words. Now, connector words, we have conjunctions, prepositions, relative pronouns, and participles. All right, those are the connector words that introduce a clause or a phrase. Okay? And so we want to identify those connector words, because then by doing that, we will identify each phrase and clause in the sentence. Now, you can also use punctuation. Sometimes punctuation is a helpful tool to identify phrases and clauses, but remember, it's interpretive. But usually the connector words, for the most part, you'll have connector words will be your guide as to the phrases and clauses. All right, so let's just remind ourselves a little bit the connector words, what they do. In conjunctions, we have two kinds. We have coordinating and subordinating. All right. Remember, coordinating, the idea is it connects words, phrases, or clauses that are grammatically equal. Remember, and boy, those are the five common coordinating conjunctions: and, nor, but, or, and yet. All right. They can connect to independent clauses. Bob rode a taxi and Noor rode with him. All right. They can connect two words. Bob and Noor rode a taxi. So in the first example, Bob rode a taxi. That is a independent clause, complete thought. Subject Bob, rode is a verb. And then we have and Noor rode with him. So Noor is a subject, somebody's name, and rode is the verb. And it also is going to be independent clause because it's connected to the first clause, which was independent. Again, it'll connect two grammatically equal words, phrases, or clauses. In the next example, Bob and Noor rode a taxi. So Bob and Noor is connected to Bob through the conjunction and they're both the subject. They both rode a taxi. Or we could have two dependent clauses. Bob preached so that we would hear the word and we would know what it means. So Bob preached, that's my independent clause. Subject Bob, preached is a verb. So that is a conjunction that connects we would hear the word and then also and we would know what it means. So we would know what it means is connected to we would hear the word. Both of these are dependent because of that so that. And then finally, two phrases. Bob rode home in a taxi and in a van. All right, so here the word and is connecting in a van, preposition with a noun, prepositional phrase, with in a taxi. All right, again, grammatically equal. So for this, really just remember and boy. Okay? And boy is if you can remember those five words, and when you see them, you know automatically I have a coordinating conjunction, so it's going to connect whatever follows it is grammatically equal to something before it that it's connecting to. Now, there are also subordinating conjunctions. Now, these conjunctions connect they introduce a clause and they connect it to another word in the sentence. They always modify. That's the idea of sub, to come under. All right. Now I put here some of the common subordinating conjunctions. There are several more. These are among the most common. So notice here, Bob rode a taxi. All right, that's my independent clause. And then notice so that, okay, that's not a coordinating conjunction. That's subordinating because it's saying so that he would get home faster. So he would get home faster is modifying rode. It's giving the reason why he rode a taxi. Okay. Here's another example. If you want to be home soon, you need to ride a taxi. Well, here, notice that things got switched a little. You need to ride a taxi is my independent clause. If you want to be home soon is my dependent clause, introduced by if, a subordinating conjunction. How would these look on a diagram? So, for example, Bob rode a taxi. That's my independent clause. I bring it to the left so that, and that this modifies rode. It's telling us why. Okay, why he rode a taxi so that he would get home faster. Now, in the second sentence, if you want to be home, if you want to be home soon, that is subordinating. It's a clause, but it's subordinating with that word if. So it's going to modify something else. In this case, it's saying the condition. If you need to ride a taxi, if you want to be home soon. Okay, so I indent it over need to ride, my verbal idea here. Okay. All right. So that's conjunctions, subordinating and coordinating. Then we have prepositions. All right. Remember, prepositions are introduce a phrase. They the most common ones, these 9. Again, I encourage you to remember, memorize them: at, with, in, for, from, by, on, of, and to, a with, boot. Okay, if you can remember these 9, you will be able to see, 70, 80% of the prepositions in the passage. All right. So for example, worship the Father. Okay, that's my independent clause. Worship's my verb. Use the subject. You worship the Father. And notice here we have in spirit and in truth. Okay, now we have a couple things going on here. Notice we have and, that's a coordinating conjunction. So it's connecting in truth with in spirit. But then we have the prepositions in, which is introducing the phrases go together. So how would this be diagrammed? Worship, that's my verb. How? In spirit and in truth. Okay? So that's telling us how to worship the Father. All right, next one. He came home. There's my independent clause. He came home with his son. That's my phrase. Notice introduced by with, preposition, and with, at part of a with boot. He came home. How did he come home? With his son. All right. So this is how I would diagram that. Okay, so we have conjunctions, we have prepositions, we have a third kind of connector word, the relative pronoun. And the relative pronoun is pretty easy to spot. Just look for who or which or sometimes that. I was the man. That's my independent clause, standalone. Who preached? So that modifies man. It's describing the man. All right, who? Which man we talking about? The man who preached. Here's my relative pronoun, who. So any word, who or which or whomever, or whichever, whom, who, whose, those are all forms of relative pronouns. And they're always going to modify a noun and point back to a noun. All right. And then the most difficult category of connector words is participles. All right. These we have the most trouble with. Participle looks like a verb, but it doesn't act like a regular verb. It's a verb with an ing ending, but there's no subject, no article, no verb of being in front of it. So it modifies something else in the sentence. So I went to the store running all the way. This is a participle and it modifies went. It's telling how I went. How did I go? Running all the way. Okay. Now, I did note for you that sometimes it can look like a participle, but actually not being. So one case is it acts like a regular verb. He is running to the store. I see running there again, but notice here he is running. So in English, that represents an ongoing present tense action. So this is not a participle, it's actually a regular verb. Okay. Now, the running or running to the store made me tired. All right. The running to the store. So notice the in front of it, an article. This is an article always goes in front of a noun, not a verb. So this cannot be a regular verb here, nor a participle, because we have the article. Okay. So it'd be the running to the store or just running to the store made me tired. Those are participles. And then finally, I mentioned punctuation can help identify, but be careful with that. So each phrase and clause uh, can be identified by a connector word. And again, it introduces the phrase or clause. So we might have an independent clause and a connector word followed by a dependent clause, another connector word followed by a phrase, connector word, phrase, etc. within the sentence. And remember, the connector words do two things in the sentence. First, they introduce a phrase or clause, and they tell us where the previous phrase or clause ends. Because if you have another connector word, so for example, if I look here, hear my son, your father's instruction, and subordinating conjunction. So that's going to mean this is the start of a new clause or phrase. All right. And the word and also tells me where the previous clause ends. So connector words have two functions. They tell you where the previous clause ends because they introduce a new clause or phrase. Okay. So with that, let's remember our maybe I'll put them over here. Our key connector words. Just by way of reminder. All right. We have conjunctions. All right, so I've got the key connector words to the right, and then we'll look at the example in Proverbs 8:15 as we go through. So let's go verse by verse. Okay, so hear my son, your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Well, notice here we have the coordinating conjunction and. Indeed, they are a graceful wreath to your head and ornaments about your neck. Well, we have a preposition here to, coordinating conjunction and then another preposition about. Now, notice to is part of our with boot over here. To here, you can see. Now, about is another preposition. It's not one of the 9 most common ones. So yes, once in a while you will have one that is different than we, is not part of the common list. But like I said, 70 or 80% of the time it will be. All right, my son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. Well, we have if. That's a subordinating conjunction. Remember F swab it. Notice if is there. It's a common one. do not consent. If, subordinating conjunction, they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood, let us ambush the innocent without cause. We have with, preposition, let us lie in wait, in preposition, for preposition. Let us ambush the innocent without is another preposition. Now notice with, for, and in are all part of the nine most common. Without is not. Okay. Let us swallow them alive, like Sheol. Like is going to function here as preposition. Even whole as those who go down to the pit. Who is a relative pronoun. To is my preposition. Okay. We will find all kinds of preposition of precious wealth. We will fill our houses with preposition spoil. Throw in your lot with us. We shall all have one purse. With is preposition. My son, do not walk in the way with them. In is preposition, with is preposition. Keep your feet from preposition, their path. Okay, and I think that is all. Now we have thrown in here. In is normally a preposition, but it's part of the verb throw here. It's not throw your lot, it's throw in your lot with us. So it's part of the verb in this case, a special case. All right, and again, notice almost all the prepositions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 prepositions. All but 2 of them are from our common list. Okay, so 2 out of 13. So what is that? Again, that's more than 80% of the prepositions. And then we had a few conjunctions. All right, so now once we've identified those, the next step is to now they introduce the phrases or clauses in the sentence. And so we're just going to go through now and state how each phrase and clause functions in the sentence. All right, so these tell us we can just start separating, all right, with each. So all I do is I'm just separating now. Now my son goes with, yeah, we'll just separate it there. If sinners say, come, okay, with us, let us lie in wait for blood, let us ambush the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, even as those who go down to the pit. We will find all kinds of precious wealth. We will fill our houses with spoil. Throw in your lot with us. Shall I have one purse? My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your feet from their path. Okay? So that's what I do next. First I identify the words, and then identify the connector words, and then I'll go through and just chop up the paragraph with each connector word introducing the phrase or clause. Okay? And then once I've done that, now I want to consider how does each phrase or clause function in the sentence? What does it modify and how? Okay, now you're going to have to talk a little bit of grammar here to remind you of a couple things. So please stick with me here. We have to remember every sentence in English, there's 4 basic building blocks, so to speak. It's made up of 4 basic elements. The noun, the verb, the adjective, and the adverb. Here, let me do this. All right. Remember nouns, person, place, or thing. A verb, an action or state of being. An adjective now modifies a noun. Okay? So an adjective modifies a noun. An adverb modifies a verb or another adjective or another adverb. So technically you need to draw it like this. Okay? But for our purposes, our main focus is we want to consider it modifies another verb. Okay? So noun and verb, and the adjective modifies noun, adverb modifies a verb. So you can have a word that functions that way, or you can have a phrase or a clause. So for example, he is a tall man. Okay, here we have a word, tall, okay, where, let me get rid of this. Tall is modifying man, okay? It's telling us something about the man. What kind of man? The tall man, all right? So in this case, it's a word. Now, I could have said, he is a man who is tall. Now, notice here I introduced a relative pronoun. Okay, and in this case, who is tall is functioning like an adjective. It's a clause functioning like an adjective. So, all right, both of these modify the man. It's a tall man or the man who is tall. Okay, both, we can either have a word that modifies or an entire clause. Okay, so that's an adjective. Now, adverb, so I probably should put that. Adverb modifies a verb. So we could have, it can again be a word or a phrase or a clause. He ran quickly. Okay, here, quickly is my adverb. It's modifying ran. It's telling how he ran. Or I could have said, he ran with quickness. Notice here now, with quickness is a phrase introduced by the preposition with. And so in both cases, we can either have the one word that modifies the verb ran, he ran quickly, or we can have this phrase modifies the verb. Okay? Both of these are functioning like an adverb. How would I diagram it? He ran how quickly? So I put quickly under ran, or he ran with quickness. That's how I would do that. Okay? So just think of it that way. So this is all we're doing. When we're doing a diagram, just try to simplify it in your mind. Okay? I have an independent clause. Then I find all the other phrases and clauses. How do I do that? Look for my connector words. Those introduce the phrases or the clauses. Then I'm trying to think, okay, how does each phrase or clause work in this sentence? All right. Now it's either going to be independent clause or it's going to be a dependent clause or a phrase. A dependent clause or a phrase modifies something else. And it'll modify it in one of two ways, like an adjective or an adverb. Meaning the phrase or clause is going to modify a noun or it's going to modify a verb. And you just have to figure out what is it modifying and how. In what way is it modifying that? Okay, so let's go to that third step. And this is the hardest step to do. All right. It's relatively easier to identify phrases and clauses looking for the connector words. But now when you're trying to figure out, okay, what's it doing here? That's a little harder. So let's look at a couple examples and then we'll go to passage. All right, so here's one example. He preached the sermon on Sunday. Notice he preached the sermon. That's an independent clause. He, subject, preach is my verb. In this case, I have an object, the sermon, what he preached. And then we have this phrase, on Sunday. Notice it's introduced by the preposition on. And it tells us when he preached. It's modifying preached. All right, it's telling us when he preached. So it's acting like an adverb, right? Because it's modifying an action, a verb. Okay, how about this one? He preached the sermon at church. Again, we have the same independent clause, at church, another phrase. And notice here, how is this functioning? What is it modifying? It's modifying preached because it's telling us when. or sorry, where he preached. All right, again, adverb, because it's modifying the verb, preached. It's describing the action. All right, another example. He preached the sermon with passion. Same independent clause. Now I have another phrase, with passion, introduced by the preposition with. And this is telling us how he preached. Again, adverb because it's modifying the verb. And again, it's the phrase with passion. Okay, some examples for an adjectival phrase or clause. I'll just give you one. He preached a sermon, so I'm back, same independent clause. And then notice this time, which was long. Now here, we've got a clause, which, introduced by which, pronoun, that's the subject, and was is the verb, which was long. And it's not modifying preached, it's modifying sermon. It's describing the sermon. And so I put it under that. So this is, what kind of sermon? And so it's an adjective. So it's, again, a clause modifying the word in a sentence. All right? So again, that's what we have here. We've got, you'll either have a phrase or clause that's independent, or you could have a dependent clause or phrase. The dependent clause or phrase is going to modify another word in a sentence, and it's going to modify either a verb or a noun. Just think those two things. So is it pointing to a verb, telling us something about a verb, an action, or is it telling us something about a noun? That is it functioning like an adjective or an adverb? And then you put it under the word that it's modifying. Okay? So with that, let's go back to our example from Proverbs and Proverbs 1. And here, actually, let me take, oh yeah, we can do this. All right. Already have, so we'll just take we've got each phrase and clause broken down. So now what I'm going to do is just indicate here, I'm probably going to need a little more space. Indicate what each phrase and clause is doing. So we've already identified in the green here, these are my independent clauses. So I'm just going to put that independent clause. Okay. And that's the case for the first two statements there. Now, verse 9, indeed they are a graceful wreath. Now, does that stand alone? They is a subject, are is a verb, and wreath is my subject complement. So they are a graceful wreath. That's a complete thought. All right. It is, of course, connected to the previous statements. It's describing the father's instruction, the mother's teaching, but it's a complete statement. It's a clause that stands alone. So we have another independent clause. Now, to your head. Now, that's a phrase. There's no subject and verb, and it's modifies what? In this case, a verb, because it's telling us where they are a graceful wreath to your head. Okay. And then notice here we have and ornaments. Notice we have and coordinating conjunction is going to connect to grammatically equal. What's it connecting to? Well, it's going back to wreath. They are graceful wreath, and they are ornaments about your neck. So here, this connects to wreath. So it's parallel to wreath. It's grammatically equal. It's the subject. They are a graceful wreath. They are ornaments. And about your neck, now this modifies the ornaments because it's telling us what kind of ornaments or which ornaments. Okay. The ornaments, which ones? The ones about your neck. All right. Now, verse 10, my son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. All right. This is a little bit more complicated because you have now my son, but then right after that, you have this if. Remember, if is a subordinating conjunction. It's followed by a clause. Sinners is the subject, entice is the verb. So we have a clause here. But what kind of clause? Is it dependent or independent? Well, notice the conjunction if. That tells us that this is a dependent clause. All right, it's a dependent clause. It modifies something. What does it modify? Well, it modifies the verb consent. It's giving the condition for that verb. All right, that's telling us the condition. I need to back for that verb consent. I'll show you that it might be a little clearer when I diagram this. All right, because do not consent, this is the verb with the subject, my son, right? Or technically, the subject is you. You do not consent. All right, so my son do not consent. That is the clause here. All right, and it's an independent clause. And if sinners entice modifies consent because it's the condition. Now notice we have again an if they say in verse 11, um, come with us, let us lie in wait. So if they say, where does that go? Does it modify consent? Well, notice we will see what it modifies when we get to verse 15. All right, verses 11 through 14 are all what they're saying. They're given a number of statements that they're saying. And his main instruction is don't walk with them, my son, if they say these things. So again, it's a condition. All right. It's a dependent clause. It modifies, in this case, walk in verse 15, telling the condition. Meaning, if they say, then do not walk in the way with them. All right. Again, maybe the diagram might be able to show that a little more clearly. So come, that's basically right? It's a clause. Subject is you. Verb is come, and it's starting. It's like a independent clause in the quotation. If they say come, and then with us, that's this modifies come, telling where, right? Come with us. All right. Let us lie. Lie in wait is the full. It's another clause. It's independent. Right? It's parallel to come. All right. And it might be easier in this step to, well, let's see. Come, let us lie in wait. Okay, this modifies lie, telling how. How are we to lie? In wait. And then for blood modifies again lie, telling why. Why are we to lie? For blood. All right. Let us ambush the innocent. Again, this is a clause. I should say, right? Parallel to let us lie. Okay, let us lie, let us ambush. Okay, without cause. All right, that's describing, that's modifies ambush, telling how. Okay, now maybe what I'll do is let me just go to the diagram itself. Okay, and I'll just explain each as we go through it. All right, to finish this off. And then you're going to have you'll have all this on your notes that I send you, so you can go through in detail and look at the rest. I just want to go ahead and diagram this. How can I do this? Uh, let's do this. Okay. So, oh, that's the problem though. Hmm. Um, Oops, up here. Okay, let's see. Let me do this. Okay, so as I said, hear my son, your father's instruction. Independent clause, so that's going to stay on the left. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. Another independent clause, it stays on the left. Okay, then we have, indeed, they are a graceful wreath. Again, independent clause. So again, we'll just keep it on the left. And if you wanted to call out the indeed, that's an exclamation. Um, you could do it this way. Remember, we said they are a graceful wreath to your head. So that's where they are a graceful wreath. Okay. So I'll put the where there. And ornaments. They are a graceful wreath. Remember, I said, and ornaments is parallel to a graceful wreath. So we'll put it down here about your neck. And that's telling us what kind of ornaments, which ornaments. So it's under ornaments. Then it's my son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. Now remember, I said, um, if sinners entice you, that was a condition of what? It was a condition of do not consent. So if they did this, if the sinners entice you, you is the implied subject, do not consent. All right. And I'll put the if sinners entice you right over consent. So it's modifying consent here. But it's just because it's said before that, we indented above it just to keep the same word order. Then again, we had now if they say, you might say, well, does that go with consent or is it something else? And I think it's going to come later in verse 15 because notice the structure. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. And then he says, if they say these things, verses 11 through 14, my son, do not walk in the way. So if they say these things, do not walk in the way with them. All right. So if they say, and this is how I do a quote, so I'll just put it under here, say, come. All right. That's a clause with us. And you could put that, I mean, you could put with us underneath come, or if you want to just put it on the same line, that's okay. I might do that in this case. And then secondly, he says, let us lie. How? In wait. So I put in wait under lie because it's how. How are we lie? In wait. Why are we going to lie? For blood. And then he keeps going. Another, let us lie, let us ambush the innocent. Notice it's these are all come with us, let us lie. These are all clauses. They're all statements, independent in a sense, but they're within the quote. That's why I don't put them all the way over here. I don't put come because this is part of the quote. So I'm putting it under say. Even though it's an independent clause, I'm putting it over here under say because it's all part of what they said. All right, let us ambush. How? Without cause. So I put it under ambush. Okay, it's adverbial here. It's modifying the verb. It's describing how. How to ambush without cause, for no reasons, basically. And then another clause, let us swallow them alive. How? Swallow like Sheol. So I put it under like, or under swallow, because it's how is swallow, like Sheol. Let us swallow them alive, like Sheol, and how are we going to even whole? Again, that's a how we will swallow. As those who go down to the pit. Okay. Again, that's kind of the idea of how. Go down where? Where we go down to the pit. So I put that under down because it's telling us where. Okay. So I might move. Yeah, that's okay. All right. Then verse 13, just continuing, another statement by the sinners. If they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood, let us ambush. And then they're continuing this now. And then they say again, we will find all kinds of goes under kinds because it's telling us what kind of kind or which kind of precious wealth. Another statement, we will fill our houses. How? With spoil. So it's going to modify fill. It's telling us how we fill with spoil. Then verse 14, continuing, another remark, throw in your lot. Where? Throw it in where? With us. So it's under throw. Telling where? Again, another statement. We shall have one purse. All right, so notice there's a closed quote here. So all of this, and this is what I'll do is I'll put a box around it. Okay, all of this is in the quote. Oops, that I did not want. Actually, let's do this so we can. All right, so I'll put the box around, notice the whole quote. And really, it's just a series of statements. Come with us. Let us lie. Let us ambush the innocent. Let us swallow them alive. That's why all these are parallel, because they're all statements. And again, they are independent clauses here within the quote. All right. So I diagram it within the quote, and that's noted by the box here. Okay. Then we go back to outside of the quote, his instruction is, my son, do not walk. So what I'll do is I'll indent if they say goes with, and I'll put an arrow here just to make it clear. If they say is modifying do not walk. Okay. Let's make it a little bigger. All right. So that's why I've got it over do not walk. Because if they say is the condition for do not walk. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Sometimes the condition will be said before the actual word it modifies. He could have said, my son, do not walk, like he did up here. My son, he could have said, my son, do not walk in the way with them if they say these things. But he started with if they say, and then he said, do not walk. Okay, so this is an independent clause down here. Just like my son, do not consent. Here it's my son, do not walk. Where? In the way. That modifies walk. And then in the way with them. That modifies how. Do not walk in the way. Do not walk with them. And then another independent clause, keep, and again, applied subject is you. You keep their feet. Where do you keep it? From their path. All right, so it's going to modify keep there. All right, so here's the whole diagram for verses 8 to 15. And notice it's several direct instructions, isn't it? Hear my son, your father's instruction. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. Now, there's a couple things to consider here. Then finally, do not consent. Do not walk. Keep your feet. Okay, now, something to consider here. And this is where poetry is a little more challenging to do because, as I mentioned to you before, in poetry, we saw this when we were doing the Psalms. In poetry, often the conjunctions are left out. They're not always there. We can see this very clearly in this particular example. Notice in the quote here, right? Come with us, let us lie, let us ambush, let us swallow. There's no and before each of these. Come with us and let us lie and let us ambush and let us swallow. But the idea is still there, right? These are all parallel statements. There's several statements being made by the sinners to entice, right? If they say this and this and this and this and this, okay? But there's no and, right? It could have been if they say this and this and this and this and this, but they just say this, 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 this. You follow me? So come with us, let us lie, let us ambush. They didn't say come with us and let us lie and let us ambush, but they're connected in that way, right? They're independent clauses connected together. Now I mention all this because I think as you go back here and say, okay, hear my son, your father's instruction, do not forsake your mother's teaching. Then he says, indeed, they're a graceful wreath to your head, ornaments about your neck. Now, yes, grammatically, that's an independent clause, but it's still, the idea here is it's, I think, still modifying, giving us a reason why we should hear and not forsake. I would indent it and then say, indeed, they are graceful wreath to your head and ornaments about your neck. And I would say this is the why. Why hear and do not forsake? Because they, that is the instruction and teaching, are a graceful wreath. So it's not an independent thought in one sense. It's connected to what he said earlier. I'd have to look it up. I could do that real quick here. Look up the let me look up the let me do this. Let me just see what the conjunction looks like here. Proverbs 1:9. Or sorry, is it 1? Yeah, 1:9. So let me see what's at the beginning. 4. Ah, see, there we go. Okay, so it's a translation. So actually, another way to have done this would be to do this. To go to Bible Hub. All right, let me just pull this up for you guys. This is, like I said, something important to consider because in this case, actually, the conjunction is there. It wasn't left out. It was just the way it was translated was a little different. So let me show you this. So let's go to Proverbs, if it'll let me. Proverbs, chapter 1. Again, we're going to do interlinear, so I'm going to go to interlin here, interlin. All right, verse 9. Notice verse 9, there's the word key, which translated for. Notice it says here conjunction. All right, so the translators, they chose to translate it as indeed. You know what? I used the New American Standard, didn't I? It says indeed. The Legacy Standard says for. So it translates the conjunction properly there. Let me see if the ESV does. ESV did a good job too. They put for. Okay. New King James, let's see. For. Okay. So it was just a matter of, and as I've mentioned to you before, check the other translations. because you may catch some things like we just caught here. So that indeed actually should be for. Um, so it's for. So that what does for mean? It gives a reason. So this is what it does to our diagram. By checking that interlinear, um, we then recognize the word for is there. And so here, instead of indeed, it's really the word for. Giving a reason. Okay? So was proper and right to put it under here and forsake because it's telling us why. It's giving the reason. Okay? So, good reminder for us. Check the interlinear, check the other English translations after you've done the diagram. So we diagrammed it in the New American Standard Translation. So diagram it in the translation you're using, but then don't assume that everything is translated exactly as it should be. Sometimes there may be some differences. And in this case, we saw the New American Standard put indeed, but every other, ESV, New King James, LSB all put for, which is what the interlinear showed it should be. Conjunction, giving a reason. All right. And so we do it this way. So this is what our diagram looks like. Okay. Again, notice in the green, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 direct instructions, 5 commands given by Solomon to his son in this case regarding his instruction and his mother's teaching. All right. And then a warning. So we have the instruction. So how would I outline this? 2 points. I would make it. Yeah, there's 5 independent clauses, but 2 points because the first two imperatives have to do with listening to instruction, wisdom, right? Following the instruction, and then the reason. So the command and the reason. And then verse 10 gives the warning. And both the warnings are related, right? The do not consent, do not walk, keep your feet. Those are all connected commands, right? They're all similar. So that's why I'd make this 1 point. And then the warning is, look, if sinners entice you, don't consent. And then he gives, how would they entice? Well, if they say, and then these things. So I would combine it into the warning. So the first is the command to listen and follow and the reason. And then the second point would be the warning not to follow. So maybe what to follow and why, and then what not to follow and why in the second part. Okay? So hopefully that gives you a little head start on your assigned passage from Proverbs. Just follow those same 4 steps that we did here in this example. And first independent clause, connector words to find the rest of the phrases and clauses, then figure out how each phrase and clause is functioning in the sentence, and then diagram it accordingly, putting the phrase or clause it modifies under the word that it modifies. Okay, so I'll provide this example for you in the summary, the handout, and you can look it over in more detail, and then go ahead and get going on your assignment 318, I think it is, or is it 319? 319 in this case. Okay? And feel free to ask any questions, but you really need to get caught up at this point. Like I said, we've got a little more than a month left, so that's actually exactly a month left. The 16th of May today, and tomorrow will be, the module will be June 16th. So you do have a month, but don't put off anymore. Really get to work on getting those assignments done, and I'll do my best to give you feedback as I can. Okay. Any questions or anything you have, feel free to message me, and I'll be happy to respond to that. So continuing to pray for you guys that you'll be able to have the time needed to do those assignments. And feel free to let me know if you need any help at all with that. Okay. God bless you, brothers. Looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks.